I'm not big on legends and that kind of thing. I would like to be remembered as a good actor.
February 26, 2025. The world received shocking news. Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa had been found dead in their Santa Fe home alongside one of their German shepherds. A cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in Santa Fe home. As investigators pieced together the timeline, a haunting detail emerged. The possibility of foul play. More perplexing was the revelation that they had been deceased since February 17, exactly 1 week after Hackman's final interview, where he made a startling confession. In this rare conversation, the reclusive legend finally addressed the real reason for his abrupt exit from cinema 2 decades earlier. What truth had Hackman been harboring all these years? What final confirmation did he leave behind concerning why he left Hollywood? Join us as we uncover the shocking secrets that Gene Hackman almost took to his grave. An autopsy was performed. Initial findings noted no external trauma to either individual. The reluctant icon. Origins of a Hollywood legend. Eugene Allen Hackman's journey to stardom was neither direct nor glamorous. Born in San Bernardino, California in 1930, his early life was marked by instability and abandonment. When he was just 13, his father left the family, driving away. As young Gene played in the street, that singular moment, an offhand gesture that sealed his abandonment, would fuel both his performances and his psychological struggles throughout life. Tragedy continued to shadow Hackman when in 1962 his mother died in a fire after accidentally setting her mattress ablaze with a cigarette before finding. Acting Hackman lied about his age to join the Marines at 16, serving 4 years, including stints in China and Japan, but his military career was hardly distinguished. I have trouble with direction, Hackman later confessed. Because I have trouble with authority. I was not a good Marine. After a brief attempt at studying journalism at the University of Illinois under the GI Bill, Hackman enrolled at the Pasadena Playhouse in California. It was here that he and fellow student Dustin Hoffman were infamously voted least likely to succeed. Undeterred, Hackman moved to New York, where he took menial jobs including working as a doorman and polishing executives' chairs on the night shift at the Chrysler Building. While pursuing his dream, one day while working as a doorman, Hackman encountered a former Marine drill instructor who, without even looking at him, muttered, "Hackman, you're a sorry son of a," rather than breaking him. The insult hardened his resolve. It was more psychological warfare, Hackman later said, because I wasn't going to let those first get me down. These early struggles shaped the man who would one day walk away from fame at its peak, a decision he would finally explain in full just 1 week before his death. Against all odds, the rise of an unconventional star. While most Hollywood leading men found fame in their 20s, Hackman was 37 when he finally broke through with his Oscar-nominated performance as Buck Barrow in 1967's Bonnie and Clyde. Warren Beatty, who had worked with Hackman on the 1964 film Lilith, recognized his talent and insisted on casting him despite studio reservations, but it was his performance as Jimmy Poe Doyle in 1971's The French Connection that transformed Hackman from character actor to Hollywood star. The irony wasn't lost on him. Director William Friedkin had initially opposed his casting, preferring virtually every other tough guy actor in Hollywood. I was at least seventh choice, Hackman later joked. The role won him his first Academy Award despite a troubled production. Hackman was uncomfortable with the Characters racism and ISM frequently clashing with Friedkin, but this creative tension produced one of cinema's most electric performances. Hackman's authenticity and raw intensity made him stand out in an era of movie star glamour without Matina idol looks. He created a new template for leading men, focused on substance rather than style. I didn't have the looks for that kind of leading man part, he admitted, but that era was already gone by the time I got into movies in the 50s following the behind a choice whose true motivation he would confirm in his final days. Master of versatility, the craftsman at work. Few actors in Hollywood history have displayed Hackman's remarkable range. He could inhabit the skin of characters from every walk of life, convincing as both heroes and villains, in comedy and drama, in period pieces and contemporary tales. His portrayal of surveillance expert Harry Coe in The Conversation revealed a man consumed by guilt and paranoia, communicating volumes through minimal dialogue and subtle expressions. And there you see part of a performance that typical of Gene Hackman's greatness is the kind of actor who can convince us of the utter authenticity of his characters. Critic Roger Ebert praised his subtlety in Mississippi Burning, where Hackman played an FBI agent investigating civil rights murders in 1960s Mississippi. The role earned him his second Oscar nomination for Best Actor, yet this same actor could pivot to comedy with astonishing ease. His brief but unforgettable cameo as a blind hermit in Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein showcased impeccable comic timing. Brooks later revealed that Hackman fought to be in Young Frankenstein because he wanted to prove his versatility. His Golden Globe winning performance as Royal Tenenbaum Baum in Wes Anderson's 2001 comedy The Royal Tenenbaums Baums came late in his career, demonstrating that his talents only deepened with age. Perhaps his most commercially successful role was as the deliciously villainous Lex Luthor in the Superman films, bringing a wicked charm to his scenes opposite Christopher Reeve. Hackman's second Oscar came for playing Sheriff Little Bill Daggett in Clint Eastwood's revisionist western Unforgiven in 1992. Initially reluctant to take the role due to its violence, he changed his mind when Eastwood explained that the film would expose rather than glorify the brutality of the era. The performance, chilling in its casual cruelty, demonstrated Hackman's ability to find humanity even in monstrous characters. What set Hackman apart was his unique approach to the craft. Film director John Moore recalled watching him prepare. He was just quietly sitting there, taking script pages out, cutting them up, removing extraneous stuff like scene descriptions, and then sticking them back onto blank pages. When Moore asked about this process, Hackman simply stated, "Acting is my job, you do the rest." Director Alan Parker, who worked with Hackman on Mississippi Burning, summarized his genius. Gene is someone who is a very intuitive and instinctive actor. The brilliance of G. Hackman is that he can look at a scene and he can cut through to what is necessary, and he does it with extraordinary economy. He's the quintessential movie actor. He's never showy ever, but he's always right on the man behind the characters. Hackman's inner struggles for all his success on screen. Hackman's private life was marked by complexity and contradiction. The childhood trauma of abandonment never fully healed, manifesting in his self-admitted problem with authority figures and a volcanic temper that earned him the nickname thus. Among industry insiders, dysfunctional families have sired a number of pretty good actors, Hackman once wryly observed, acknowledging how personal pain fueled his performances. His friend Dustin Hoffman claimed that Hackman had a near compulsion for confrontation, occasionally announcing I got to go, before heading to a bar because he had to get in a fight even in his 70s. Hackman's temper flared in 2001 at age 71. He got into a fist fight with two men over a minor traffic accident in West Hollywood. He brushed against me and I popped him, Hackman recalled. Then the other guy jumped on me. We had this ugly wrestling match on the ground. 11 years later, at 82, he slapped a homeless man who had verbally assaulted his wife in Santa Fe. Financial instability punctuated his life despite his success. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Gene Hackman faced significant financial difficulties due to extravagant spending on luxury items like private planes and expensive cars, coupled with unsuccessful tax shelters that left him in time. He confessed that the temptations, including the money and recognition, had been too much for the poor boy in him, and that he hadn't been able to handle that. In 1991, he married classical pianist Betsy Arakawa, who was 32 years his junior. Their relationship brought stability to his later years, though. Longtime friend Robert Duvall described Hackman as a tormented guy, always into his own space, his own thing. The cost of Hackman's intensity was perhaps best summarized by Frances McDormand, who worked with him on Mrs. Mississippi Burning. She observed that during script readings, Hackman had an amazing capacity for not giving away any part of himself, a protective mechanism that served him well professionally but complicated his personal relationships. Storms brewing. Hackman's contentious relationship with Hollywood. If Gene Hackman's performances appeared effortless on screen, the reality behind the cameras told a different story. I had known for many years but had never. We worked together and he was in a mood at that time. He says, I don't want to do any more violent pictures, I'm tired of it. I've been involved with a lot of them. He says throughout his career, Hackman developed a reputation for clashing with directors, challenging their authority and resisting what he saw as unnecessary intrusions into his process. He suffered no fools. Director Barry Sonnenfeld bluntly stated the fiery relationship between Hackman and William Friedkin on The French Connection became legendary despite, or perhaps because of, their frequent heated arguments about the character's racism and the film's approach. They created a cinematic masterpiece. Friedkin later described Hackman as a Midwestern knee-jerk liberal who struggled with Popey Doy's darker qualities. On the set of The Royal Tenenbaums, Hackman's conflicts with director Wes Anderson reached such intensity that co-star Bill Murray reportedly came to set on days he wasn't filming just to protect the young filmmaker. Co-star Angelica Houston recalled Hackman once snapping at Anderson to pull up his pants and act like a man. Even years later, Murray acknowledged how tough Hackman had been, describing him as really rough on Wes. But despite the friction, he made one thing clear: Hackman delivered a great performance. Sonnenfeld witnessed a particularly tense standoff between Hackman and John Travolta during the filming of 1995's Get Shorty. The methodical Hackman, who always arrived knowing his lines perfectly, grew increasingly frustrated with Travolta's more relaxed approach when Travolta casually asked what Hackman had done over the weekend. Hackman replied coldly, "Nothing except learn my lines," to which Travolta responded, "Well, that's a waste of a weekend." According to Sonnenfeld, Hackman grew angrier and angrier as filming continued. What truly irritated Hackman wasn't just unprepared colleagues, it was the entire filmmaking process, or as he called it, the business part of show business. Barry Sonnenfeld recalled that Hackman despised putting on makeup and getting into wardrobe. The Constant touch-ups drove him crazy. Whether it was a wardrobe assistant smoothing his clothes with a lip brush after takes or a makeup artist wrecking his hair mid-conversation, all those little intrusions, the fussing and adjusting, were exactly the kind of thing that made him bristle. Director John Moore also observed that Hackman would often become irritated with actors who were peacocking themselves, but was generally patient and relentlessly, flawlessly professional. What connected all these stories was Hackman's singular focus on the work itself, the pure act of acting, and his growing disdain for everything surrounding it. As he put it to interviewer Larry King, "When I'm actually on the set or a stage, actually doing the work, I love that process, and I love the creative process of trying to bring a character to life, whereas the business part of show business is kind of wicked." This internal conflict, loving the craft while hating its context, created a growing dissonance that would eventually drive one of Hollywood's most respected actors to walk away entirely. These Hackman pushed forward, winning his second Oscar just 2 years later for Unforgiven, and maintaining a busy schedule throughout the 1990s. The demanding nature of film work, long hours, emotional intensity, travel, and promotional duties created stress that his doctors increasingly cautioned against as Hackman moved into his 70s. The physical requirements of certain roles became more challenging. He had to balance his professional standards with his body's limitations. His concern for his family's well-being grew alongside his health worries. In a 2004 interview with Larry King, Hackman revealed a vulnerable side rarely seen in his public persona. "I want to make sure that my wife and my family are taken care of. Other than that, I don't have a lot of fears." This statement revealed much about a man who had gone from poverty to extreme wealth and back again during his tumultuous early career. Financial security for his loved ones had become a priority over professional ambition. The physical demands of acting continued to pose challenges even as a seasoned professional. Hackman found that remembering dialogue became more difficult with age, though never explicitly stated. Colleagues noticed that he sometimes struggled with lines that would have come easily to him years before. An ominous sign came in 2012 when the 82-year-old Hackman was struck by a pickup truck while cycling in the Florida Keys. Academy Award-winning actor Gene Hackman's out of the hospital after an accident in the Florida Keys. The 81-year-old was riding his bike when a car bumped him from behind. He was airlifted to Miami, though his publicist downplayed the incident as resulting in just a few bumps and bruises. The accident highlighted his vulnerability despite his remarkable fitness for his age. Throughout this period, Hackman began to weigh the satisfaction he derived from acting against the physical and emotional costs. The balance was shifting, and behind closed doors, a critical medical assessment would soon force his hand the final curtain, the decision that changed everything. By early 2004, Gene Hackman had starred in nearly 80 films. Over a 40-year career, he had nothing left to prove. 2 Oscars, 2 BAFTAs, and 4 Golden Globes attested to his extraordinary talent. Yet the decision to step away from Hollywood came not from a sense of completion, but something more pressing. His final film role came in the 2004 comedy Welcome to Mooseport, where he played a former U.S. president who runs for mayor of a small Maine town. It was an inauspicious end to a legendary career. The film underperformed both critically and commercially. Perhaps fittingly, Hackman's last scene showed him chasing after an airplane to stop the woman he loved from leaving. In retrospect, it seemed like a metaphor for a man trying to hold on to time that was slipping away. In July 2004, Hackman gave a rare interview to Larry King where he hinted that his acting days might be behind him. However, it wasn't until 2008 that he officially confirmed his retirement to Reuters. "I haven't held a press conference to announce retirement, but yes, I'm not going to act any longer. I've been told not to say that over the last few years in case some real wonderful part comes up, but I really don't want to do it any longer," the statement revealed both his disbias and the reluctance of his representatives to close the door completely on one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. But Hackman knew what his body was telling him. Unlike many actors who announce retirements only to return repeatedly, Hackman meant what he said. Apart from narrating a few documentaries about the Marine Corps years later, he never returned to acting. The decision was final, a clean break from the profession that had defined him for 4 decades, a new chapter, life beyond the spotlight. Hackman's retreat from Hollywood wasn't just a retirement, it was a complete reinvention. Settling in Santa, New Mexico with wife Betsy Arakawa, he embraced a quieter existence. Far modern Hollywood had changed enough that he might have continued working under different circumstances. Hackman reportedly chuckled, "Hollywood evolves on the surface, but fundamentally it remains the same beast, voracious, demanding, exhausting. I loved my career, but it was time to choose living over performing." The conversation drifted to his legacy, a topic that typically made him uncomfortable. "I hope people remember the work, not the man," he said. "The characters were interesting. I was just the vessel." When pressed about what he was most proud of, he paused before answering that "I knew when to leave the party. Most folks in my profession stay too long. I went out on my terms, maybe not at my absolute peak, but close enough." In these final reflections delivered just 1 week before his passing, Hackman confirmed what many had long suspected. His departure from Hollywood hadn't been about dissatisfaction with the industry or diminishing opportunities, but a stark choice between his art and his life. In the end, he chose life, 20 more years of it filled with love, creativity, and the quiet dignity that had always been his hallmark. Gene Hackman's final confession reveals a man who chose life over legacy, making the difficult decision to walk away. It reminds us that sometimes the